I'm going to ask you something that might sting a little. If saving the only family you have meant selling the one thing you swore you'd never sell, would you do it? And if you did, could you look at yourself the next morning without breaking? Here's the part that still makes my chest tight. The man who bought that night refused to let me drown. And that is where everything I thought I knew about love and power snapped in two. My name is Amelia, and for a long time the only thing I owned with any pride was my hunger. It kept me sharp, it kept me moving, it kept me from crying when people whispered behind notebook covers, you know what I mean? The day I fainted in the lecture hall didn't feel dramatic. From the inside, it felt like my pen slid off the page. The letters turned to water, and the floor rose up slow like it had been waiting for me. There were gasps, a chair scraping back, and then a man's voice, firm like a locked door, careful like a hand on glass, said, "You fainted. When was the last time you ate?" I lied. Of course I lied. Poor people do that when kindness feels dangerous. I said I was fine. He didn't believe me. His name was Kelvin. And he wasn't really a professor, more like a visiting storm in a navy suit. The kind of guest lecturer the school brings in to make us think success has a smell, students whispered like birds. That's him, that's the CEO. And I stared at my shoes, because eye contact can feel like debt when you have nothing to offer back. Let me paint the rest. I worked afternoons tutoring kids whose pens cost more than my textbooks, nights at a piano lounge with red chairs and a stubborn old upright that stayed in tune out of spite. And every spare hour I had went to the hospital where my brother David lay in a coma, 2 years of rent owed to a machine that kept him breathing. I learned how to say thank you, with my eyes to nurses who kept letting me stay past visiting hours. I learned how to stretch buns and soy milk into something like a meal. And I learned how to hold my head up even when people tried to bend it. That night, after the fainting, I was back at the piano, fingers moving. Because if they stopped, my brain would start. The door opened, and Kelvin walked in like money had taught him how to move without apologizing. He saw me and the room changed. He sat near the piano and asked a question I'd heard 1,000 times from people who didn't care. Why are you working yourself to death? Except he waited for the answer like it mattered. So I told him halfway, tuition overdue, 20,000, hospital, demanding deposits. I did not have hunger, pretending to be disciplined. His jaw shifted like numbers were rearranging behind his eyes, and then he said it. I can give you 500,000 one night with me, just one. I laughed. Or maybe I hiccuped. Whatever it was, courage wasn't part of it. You're my lecturer, I said. He shook his head. Guest speaker today was my last. He talked like he was closing a deal, cool, precise. And I listened, like a drowning person watches a lifeboat that might also be a shark. If it were you, what would you have done? Be honest with me right now. Would you have walked away? Would you have gone back to your brother's bed and told him pride would pay for his next treatment? Would you have looked at your tuition balance and asked it for mercy? I wish I could say I chose dignity, I chose love, I chose something that looks good on a poster, but I chose survival. I went with him, quiet, palms sweating, mind loud. His penthouse looked like a glass museum where the art had left and taken all the warmth with it. He gave me a bathroom, a shirt that hung on me like a borrowed life. He asked if I wanted to leave, and there was a softness under the steel that made it worse. Kindness can feel like a trap when you're bargaining with yourself. I stayed. I won't hand you details. You didn't ask for. Shame is heavy, but it wasn't the thing that killed me. The silence was the way it sat between us, like a contract. We both signed with our teeth clenched. Somewhere in that silence, I remembered David, school, a future I could at least point at and say I tried. Morning arrived like it always does, too bright, too honest. He stood by the window, already dressed, like he slept in an ironed suit. I grabbed my bag and my pride and headed for the door. "Eat first," he said. "You're weak. You have a fever," I said. "No, that small ugly. Throw like a pebble at a wall, won't move," he asked me a question. I hated, "Do you want to be with me?" I said. "No." It scratched my throat on the way out. He transferred the money anyway, not 500 a million, my phone buzzed. My stomach dropped. He offered a card, I shoved it back. "I'll take what I'm owed, nothing more." His eyebrow shifted like I'd surprised him. I left, blocked his number on the bus, and tried not to throw up. Pattern interrupt. 2 days later, I found out my tuition was paid for the entire year, not reduced, not paused, erased with a shiny scholarship stapled to my name. I went to the bursar's office ready to bargain for a plan, and walked out feeling skinless. Generosity doesn't always feel good sometimes. It feels like theft, like someone stole your choices while you were asleep. A classmate said a businessman had handled payments. Said he heard my name. I confronted Kelvin on campus, where his presence bent the air. Why, I asked, he tucked his hands in his pockets, like men do when they've already decided what the answer is. "Does it matter who paid? What matters is you can focus on school," I told him. His help made me feel like a piece of charity, like a project, like a rumor in heels. I told him to keep his distance. I went home and ate nothing, because resentment and gratitude fight hard in an empty stomach. Meanwhile, if you want the hallway version, the whispers had a life. She faked the fainting. "She's got a sugar daddy. He's building libraries because of her. It's funny until it isn't, until it follows you into the bathroom, into your dreams, into your own head." Lily campus queen with perfect hair threw shade in broad daylight. Don't be fooled, girls like her survive on looks. I practiced the discipline of not crying. I practiced chewing slowly, while my face felt like a match about to catch. Do you think that's fair, that a girl's hunger can be turned into entertainment by people who have never been hungry? Then came the part where I learned the difference between gossip and danger. 3 men walked into the piano lounge and aimed their voices at me like weapons. "You took money that wasn't yours." They said the name Michael like it should make me shake. One reached for my arm, and a voice from the shadows cut the air. Enough 2 of Kelvin's men, a door I didn't know existed behind the piano. A corridor that breathed dust and secrets and night air that felt like a new set of lungs. I stood there shaking and furious, grateful and trapped, because safety had to be delivered with his fingerprint on it. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. I tried to build a quiet routine and my body rebelled. Nausea, headaches, late on everything. Late on meals, late on periods, late on hope. Kelvin found my place. Don't ask how rich people know roads, the rest of us don't. And marched me to a doctor who said the truth out loud. Malnutrition, stress, lousy diet. Keep this up and your body will shut you down, being scolded like a child. When you've been holding the roof up by yourself is its own humiliation, I nodded. Promised 3 meals, promised rest, then went home and stared at an empty cupboard. At the same time, thunder rolled from Kelvin's world. I heard about boardrooms, like you hear a storm through a wall, men fired in a sweep, traitors named. And across the city, he appeared at events with Janet Wilson. The kind of woman who looks expensive from 50 feet, and somehow more expensive up close. Her family had politics in its pockets. People said the marriage made sense. I caught them together once at a hotel lobby, laughter soft like a blade. And I told myself the kind of lie that lets you function. He was never mine. I was never his. It was a transaction period. The night the black van pulled up the street was quiet enough to hear the fear in my own breath. A cloth over my mouth. Darkness, a room with women whose eyes looked like mine do. When I'm pretending to be brave, I heard the word auction. I heard numbers. I learned something about evil I wish I hadn't. It's organized, efficient. It has minimum bids and rules. They pushed me under a light, and the world turned to noise the number that ended. The noise was 3 million, a voice that sounded final, cold, familiar. I was moved fast, not gently, and then I was in a private room where 2 bodyguards stood like sentries, and Kelvin looked at me with a rage so flat it was almost calm. "You're safe now," he said. I told him he paid 3 million for me, he said. He would have paid more. Something inside me cracked. Not love, not yet a dam. I'd built to hold back relief when relief felt like surrender. He told me Michael wasn't random. He was a rival who had been watching him for years, looking for a weakness. He saw me and pounced. That was the truth, and my truth was this. If being near Kelvin turned me into a target, then I needed to get far. "I don't belong in your world," I said. "Your world is dangerous, and I can't afford to be a weakness for anyone." He didn't argue. He doesn't argue when he's already moved the chess pieces. 3 turns ahead, we sat in the quiet until it let us go. I left. And for a few days I tried to cut every thread that tied us together. Here's the twist that flipped everything. Kelvin called me to his house and put a file on the table. His voice didn't have its usual armor. "My father knew your family." I almost laughed, bitter, because romantic fate stories get told by people who never had to count coins. He kept going. Years ago, his father ran a community project, funded my dad's small shop, paid for my mom's treatment. When she was sick, the receipts were there, names, dates, signatures. Then he said the part that made me sit down. "When I first saw you, I felt like I already knew you. Now I understand why I don't trust the word fate. It's too convenient, but I can't lie. Something slid into place like a door finally found its frame." His mother. Madame Rose walked in while the room was still rearranging itself. Her face could end a meeting without words. She looked at me like I was a stain on white silk. Kelvin squared his shoulders. "Mother, this is Amelia, my girlfriend." My pulse stumbled over that word. She left cold, came back the next day to tell him this was over. He handed her the file. She read it. And I saw something. "I will always remember, resolve melting into memory," she said. His father had once told her about a good family they might owe in the future, that if the chance came to protect their children, they must not fail. I know some of you are rolling your eyes, saying this proves I was a debt, not a choice. Do you think that's fair? Because I'm still deciding where gratitude ends and autonomy begins. Then the call that reset my heartbeat. The hospital. David opened his eyes. If you've ever watched someone come back, you know the air changes shape. I ran to his bed and held a hand that finally squeezed back. I introduced him to Kelvin without telling the whole story. They shook hands, like men who understood bargains no one else could see. "Just live," Kelvin told him. "Live the life you were meant to have." And for a second, I believed I could too. Power protects itself, so Kelvin did the thing men like him never do, and did it loudly. He called a press conference, stood in front of microphones like spears, and said he would not marry Janet Wilson, said status and politics mean nothing without love. Then he said my name clearly, publicly, and chose me where everyone could hear. I watched the live stream from a tiny kitchen and shook, not because I needed the world to know, but because he said it without apology. The internet did its thing. Some people called it beautiful, some called it manipulation, some called me what people call women. When they want to break them, I learned to protect my eyes the way I protect my heart. That night, he took me to dinner, where the light was soft and the music minded its business. He knelt, yes, in the middle of the room, and asked me to marry him. "You won't survive my world alone," he said. "You'll survive it with me because you are my world now." And I heard the warning inside the promise and said yes anyway. Not because the ring was big, not because the room clapped, but because my life had already braided itself to his in a way that made untying look like breaking a bone on purpose. Before you type your comment, let me leave the mess on the table, where we can all see it. For every dollar he gave, there was a rumor. I had to outlast for every door he opened. I felt another lock click somewhere inside me. Generosity can feel like control if you grew up measuring your worth by what you can refuse. Love, real love, does not erase that math. It wrestles with it until the numbers bend. Is that fair? Maybe not. But fairness didn't pay for David's treatment. Fairness didn't pull me out of a van. Fairness didn't teach me how to eat 3 meals and sleep with both eyes closed. And yet, I won't pretend the story is simple. A one-night deal sits at the root of a love story that now wears a ring that is the truth. Some mornings I wake up furious, some mornings grateful, most mornings both. I hold both in the same hand, because dropping either means pretending this is cleaner than it is. So let me ask you, if it were you, would you have taken the money? Would you have blocked his number? Would you have let him pay the hospital bill? Would you have forgiven yourself for wanting him after? Do you think I owe the world an apology for surviving? Or do you think survival is its own kind of holiness? Yeah, that happened. And here is where I leave you with something satisfying enough to breathe and sharp enough to argue with. David is awake, walking the slow road. Back I play the piano again, and it sounds less like begging and more like prayer. Kelvin's mother calls me by my name now, not by the category I was shoved into, and I am learning how to eat breakfast without bargaining with it. But tell me this. What do we owe each other when the scales are this uneven? What is consent when hunger is sitting at the table? Does a public declaration of love wash the stain of a private transaction? Or do we just learn to live with both truths beating under the same skin? I want to hear you, all of you, defend me, challenge me, tell me your version. If this story pulled something open in you, hit like so the algorithm doesn't bury it. Subscribe. If you want more messy, honest human stories told by someone who has had to choose survival over pride more than once, and drop a comment where you're watching from, what you would have done, whether you think this is love or a contract that learned how to sing. Because that conversation is the only way any of us figure out how to live with the choices that save us and scar us at the same time.